Someone Like You by Sparkypasker, read by Distracted by Books. Chapter 49. Izuku stood in the sewer, waiting next to the closed exit to the Ch49 compound. As soon as he heard the commotion and screaming coming from above, he removed a lock-picking kit from his pocket. He had similar kits stashed all over the city. You never knew when one was going to get lost and he needed to replace them quickly. It took only a second for Izuku to pick the lock on the door. Evidently, they had enough hubris to believe no one was going to want to go into a sewer to find them. Well, joke's on them. He had experienced worse. He ran into the open room and was halfway through when he came into contact with Overhaul and one of his cronies dragging a little girl through the doorway. Overhaul's eyes widened immediately in recognition, and his heart began to race. He couldn't believe who was standing before him. "Midoriya Izuku!" he exclaimed happily. "It is so good for you to join us." "You need to let the girl go, Overhaul," Izuku said calmly. His voice was smoother than Overhaul had even imagined. No, even in his imagination, he never could have thought of a sound more perfect. "No can do, but you can come with us instead. All of us would absolutely love to be in the presence of a truly perfect human. No quirk. You haven't been stained by this society. You are the perfect being. We can destroy this world together and make it into one without quirks." Overhaul had to have him. His perfection perfectly mirrored Overhaul's own. And Izuku was far more than just a pretty face. Overhaul had researched all of Izuku's arrests. Each one was carefully thought out and methodical. It perfectly replicated Overhaul's own methods. Even if some of the people Izuku arrested were Overhaul's own, there was no one more worthy to take down those who were incompetent within the Yakuza. Izuku was doing so well. He was making them stronger just by being his perfect, quirkless self. Yes, they were made for each other. With Izuku by his side, the two of them could do everything they ever dreamed of. That's not going to happen. Overhaul's train of thought felt like it had fallen off the tracks. "What?" Overhaul asked incredulously. "But they are the ones who tormented you. They demeaned you. They cast you from the very society you should have been reigning over. And you can. You can rule at my side." This made no sense. Overhaul's disbelief quickly boiled over into anger. How dare those heroes brainwash him? How dare they take such a perfect being and convince him he can't be absolutely anything he wanted to be? Maybe he just needed to see. Overhaul could teach him how good being by his side could be. In fact, the thought of being the one to teach him about the good things in life after facing nothing but pain brought a pleasant shiver down his spine. "But I don't want to." Izuku tilted his head to the side. What in the world would make this man think he would want to rule the world? What kind of delusions was he having? They had never even met before today. All he knew about Izuku would have been what he read in the news or on forums online. That was kind of creepy. Overhaul laughed. "Protostasis, let's bring him along with us. Once he sees how great it is standing at the top, he won't ever want to leave. He will use his skills to help us pull one over on the heroes that have caused all of us nothing but pain." "Yes, sir." Chronostasis ran towards Izuku. His hood shifted, bangs lifting in preparation to strike Izuku. Izuku had done a bit of research on the Yakuza gang. Chronostasis, Kuronohari, had a quirk that effectively let him slow down time. In theory, his quirk was extremely powerful, but it only slowed down time for whatever person or object he struck with his hair, rather than an extended area. For this reason, his quirk became classified as an inferior time quirk, and he was often pushed aside. But not only that, his quirk also had a fatal weakness. He could only use it when he was standing still. Izuku theorized there was a limit to how far Chronostasis could extend his hair, based on him leaving Overhaul's side, but he could not guarantee he could escape just by making space. For all he knew, the room they were in was purposefully made with Chronostasis's quirk limitation in mind. Maybe the room was exactly as small as needed for him to stand in the center and be able to shoot from there to any of the walls, but still large enough to fit their forces. Chronostasis halted in his tracks. His hair shot out from beneath his hood. Izuku dodged. The arrow followed. Izuku ran around Chronostasis in a wide circle, continuously dodging the arrows of hair, looking to slice into his flesh. By the time Overhaul realized what was going on, Izuku was nearly on top of him. Izuku rushed toward the little girl standing silently next to Overhaul, eyes widening with Izuku's every step in his direction. Almost instinctively, Overhaul quickly removed the glove of his right hand and reached out to stop Izuku. Too bad Izuku saw that move coming. Izuku ducked under Overhaul's arm. Overhaul started to swing his arm downward, but Overhaul must have forgotten about his underling's quirk, because when Izuku leaned to the side to avoid Overhaul's hand, it was instead wrapped up in the arrow, which burst into a flurry of loose hair when it came into contact with Overhaul's hand. During the frenzy of keratin, Izuku crouched down and ran past Overhaul, his shoulder coming into contact with the girl's chest. Izuku wrapped his arms around her and held her to him while he continued to run. It took less than a minute for Izuku to separate the hostage from Overhaul. Cracking was heard coming from the ceiling. With a crash, a dragon fell through to the auditorium. A wave of rock and dust washed over Izuku as he curled himself around the small girl in his arms. Izuku saw movement out of the corner of his eye. A large blonde-haired boy came running through one of the walls. He wore a mostly white costume with 1,000,000 in large numbers written across his chest. The boy did a double take when he saw Izuku huddled near the group with the little girl in his arms. Lemillion didn't allow himself to be distracted for long. He took a quick glance around the destroyed room and immediately made a beeline for Overhaul, who was starting to gather himself, looking more and more angry as the seconds passed. "Midoriya, take Eri and get out of here!" Lemillion yelled. Easier said than done. The rubble had blocked the door Izuku had initially used, and at some point the hallway coming from the other direction had been twisted together, preventing anyone from coming or going through that direction. Instead, Izuku picked up his charge and took her behind a large chunk of the ceiling, blocking her from sight of the villains. Izuku peeked out from behind the concrete. The girl stood quietly next to him. Was that normal for children? Maybe it was because he was older now, but he was always under the impression that children were louder than this. But that was a thought for later. Izuku watched as Overhaul and Lemillion exchanged, well, not exactly blows, because that would mean Overhaul was actually touching Lemillion, and he wasn't. But Lemillion didn't really have a lot of options when it came to long-range attacks, and Overhaul's quirk was too dangerous to get too close without having his quirk active almost constantly. But he was still able to get a couple good hits in. But Overhaul was becoming enraged. Then Izuku saw a movement coming from the center of the room, close by where Izuku remembered a certain villain to have stood before the ceiling caved in. Chronostasis seemed to be grabbing for something around his waist. Had he gotten injured by the rubble? Sunshine glistened off a piece of metal. Izuku was running before he had a chance to think about it. "No! Wait, you can't!" Izuku heard a high-pitched voice yell from behind him, but quickly put the warning out of his mind. Lemillion jumped back from Overhaul, making some space for him to move. Unfortunately, with his big body, He had troubles making smaller changes to his fighting style when fighting in close combat. He had tried dropping down into the ground, then popping up to attack Overhaul, but even a glancing blow from Overhaul could result in death. So he was needing to trust his memory for Overhaul's location and only become solid at the point of impact. But needing to be intangible constantly was starting to take its toll. Even after all of his training, he still had a limit to how long he could hold his breath, and the more often he activated and deactivated his quirk, the more it ate up his stamina. Not to mention the mental strain the fight was having on him due to having to calculate his speed and distance between himself and Overhaul, then needing to deactivate only the surface of his fists at the contact point. Needless to say, he made the mistake of not keeping track of his surroundings. He heard 3 quick bangs and a flash running by him. When his brain caught up with his eyes, he saw Midoriya standing in front of him, 3 small syringes stuck in his forearm, shoulder, and chest. Lemillion was horrified. "Don't stop!" Midoriya yelled at him. "Take out Overhaul!" Midoriya ran towards Chronostasis, who was fumbling with a pocket in his coat. He took out a small case, but dropped it on the ground in his rush. It popped open, revealing more red syringes. It was the quirk-erasing bullets. And Midoriya had been hit with 3 of them. And no matter if he had a quirk or not, there was no way he was going to come out of this without some sort of problem. Then Overhaul snapped. He had been pushed back within touching distance of his cohort and, without hesitation, grabbed his subordinate's arm. Lemillion could only stand next to Midoriya and watch in horror as he morphed himself and his subordinate into something nothing short of a monster. "Lemillion!" A shout came from behind them. It was Sir! Overhaul roared and slammed his hand into the ground. Spikes shot up out of the ground and raced towards them. Lemillion instinctively became intangible. Then he remembered Midoriya had no such protection. By that time, the spikes were already up out of the ground. He shot up out of the spike and quickly looked around, fully expecting to find a young boy with a spike through his abdomen. Instead, he found Midoriya standing on top of a spike, Sir held by his collar and laying surprised on the side of the spike. An explosion was heard coming from above. Bakugo screamed as he raced into the underground space. He headed straight towards Overhaul and released his gauntlet at point-blank range. Overhaul screamed at the heat and slammed his palm on the ground, attacking with more spikes. Bakugo used his agility to dodge every attack that came his way. Lemillion saw another flash as Midoriya rushed past him towards the fight. "Midoriya!" Lemillion heard Sir yell. It was clear Midoriya had no intention of listening. Sir ran up to Lemillion, who, frankly, was exhausted at this point. "Sir, what is Midoriya doing here?" he asked. "I don't know, but Eri is our priority. She's over there, behind that rock. It looks like Overhaul's attack missed her completely. I need you to get her to safety. I will take care of the students." Lemillion nodded, running over to Eri. She recognized him. "Hi, I'm back. Now it's time to get you out of here," he said with a smile. "No!" she yelled. "That boy! He's in danger! He lost his quirk! I saw it! He was hit! You need to help him!" "Don't worry," Lemillion smiled. "He's a hero, and no hero only relies on their quirk." "But!" she yelled. "No buts. Let's go." He picked her up and held her in his arms, running along the edge of the room towards the hole in the wall Sir had created to get there. Izuku ran towards Overhaul, but he knew he had no defense against Overhaul's quirk, and he didn't have any of his equipment for long-distance attacks with him. The only thing he was able to get away with was his metal-soled shoes, and that was because they were his normal shoes, ordered through Hatsume Industries because of his quirklessness. The school had just reordered the last one he had placed since they already had his measurements, And because quirkless shoes were so specialized, they probably didn't blink at a support company being the one to make them. When Izuku had first gotten the new shoes after being released from the HPSC, he assumed the school just believed he had gotten a price break due to him ordering his gear through them as well, which wasn't wrong exactly, but not the entire truth. And he never disclosed the truth to them, and never planned to either. Or maybe they knew about it, but treated it similarly to Ayama's belt. Maybe they believed Izuku needed the metal soles due to health reasons. He doubted they actually knew about the very minor health differences between someone like him and someone with a quirk, not including those people who genuinely have different medical problems as a result of their quirk. Izuku was almost certain that Sato suffered from hypoglycemia. Thankfully, Bakugo had been keeping Overhaul busy with his explosions, but the smoke was making it difficult for Izuku to see what he was looking for. But the flash of an explosion lit up the surroundings just enough for Izuku to find it. The gun. And luckily, the case of bullets had fallen right next to it. Izuku loaded it up and lifted his arm to aim. A sharp pain pulsated through his shoulder and chest. He nearly dropped the gun in surprise. Once he was used to the pain, he lifted his arm once again. He thought about changing it to his other hand, but was not 100% accurate with his non-dominant hand. That was going to have to be something he worked on, because 98% accuracy just wasn't good enough for this situation. Izuku waited until Bakugo had Overhaul's complete attention, then pointed and shot. Ultimately, the reaction was anticlimactic. Within a few seconds, Overhaul realized he no longer had access to his quirk. He screamed in anger and attempted to use his larger form to crush Izuku, but was intercepted when a grayish-white piece of cloth flew by, wrapping around Overhaul's arm. "We are going to have a long talk when we get back to school," Izuku heard as Eraserhead flew past him, wrapping Overhaul in his cloth while swinging around. Without his quirk, it was a simple matter for Eraserhead and Dragon to subdue and arrest Overhaul. It was over. They had won. "Midoriya, let's get going." Sir walked up to Izuku and escorted him above ground. Izuku stood among the police who were arresting and loading up villains into trucks. He heard Overhaul screaming as he was hoisted from the hole in the ground into an awaiting armored truck. Due to his size and how hyped up he still was, he was getting a truck to himself. They were also going to be under the careful observation of doctors to see if there was any way they could separate Overhaul and Chronostasis. Izuku knew what it meant to be under the care of a team of doctors and believed Overhaul definitely deserved what was coming to him. Izuku saw Eraserhead walking towards him, looked away, and sighed. He was going to be lectured for sure. And he was definitely not up for it. His chest was starting to hurt more, and he just wanted to go back to his room and sleep it off. "Do you have any idea how dangerous it was to be there when we didn't know?" Eraserhead looked at him, arms crossed, and disappointed scowl on his face. Izuku stayed silent. He wasn't going to justify his actions when they really didn't care to begin with. Eraserhead sighed while pinching the ridge of his nose. "We can talk more when we get back to campus. Lemillion said you were hit with 3 of those quirk erasing bullets. Let's go see a paramedic to get those syringes removed." Izuku scrunched his eyebrows. He didn't want to see a paramedic, but he also didn't want to touch the 2 syringes that were still in his shoulder and chest. The one in his arm had fallen out shortly after he was shot with it, but the others were still firmly attached. Izuku was unsure if they were caught between some joints or what, but he knew they would need to be removed carefully, otherwise he could experience some nerve damage. So he followed behind Eraserhead. Maybe they could give him some Tylenol or something, too. Ever since the dust really started to collect, he had started to have a small headache. It was probably from the rush of adrenaline after not having done any crime fighter work for so long. But it had gotten worse as the adrenaline calmed and peace returned to the residential street they were standing in. He definitely needed a nap. He also needed to get back into shape, too. Without exercising for so long, he was far more short of breath than he should have been. He felt like he was damn near huffing and puffing as he walked to the waiting ambulance. Oh, great. Now he was getting dizzy. Izuku stopped walking. Moving seemed to be making everything worse, including the pain in his chest. Izuku sat down hard on the street. He didn't want to injure himself even further by falling flat on his face. But it didn't seem to help. The dizziness and the headache, as well as the shortness of breath. Izuku felt a hand laying softly on his back and a voice calling his name. His vision started to turn dark around the edges, but he still saw a man dressed in a dark jumpsuit kneeling next to him. He raised her head. Izuku couldn't get the strength to tell him that he was fine. He just needed a rest. He didn't need to be freaking out. The voices started to become more frantic. He heard someone close by yelling for a stretcher. He may have imagined Kirishima yelling his name. But there is one thing he did hear clearly. One of the syringes pierced the central line! End of chapter.